I'm David Charvet with Charvet Classic Cars. We're here in the showroom today with a 1932 Packard Model 903 Convertible Coupe Roadster. It's a rare model, and even rare because this one is completely original and unrestored. I'll be back to tell you more about it after you take a closer look. Like all luxury car manufacturers, Packard was really hit heavily by the effects of the Great Depression. Their production went way down from pre-1929 numbers down to, by 1932, it's around 9,000 cars that they produced. Of those, the big deluxe cars like this one, the 32 903 Convertible Coupe Roadster, there were very few of these made. Numbers with Packard are hard to really pin down only because all of the records were destroyed when they moved the factory in 1956 from Detroit to South Bend, Indiana during their merger with Studebaker. Most all of the records were thrown in the fiery furnace at the plant, and unfortunately it leaves historians now with a little bit of chasing to do to try to figure out numbers. What I do know is that this car is body number 148 of the 903 Convertible Coupe Roadsters. I also know it was delivered by Earl C. Anthony in Los Angeles in October of 1932. Now, the 9th series, of which this is one of them, was introduced in mid-1931 and, of course, went through the mid part of 1932. This car, again, was not sold until October of 32, and with number 148 and also the engine number being about 100 numbers away from the last Packard produced in the 9th series, that would tell me that this car is probably one of the last ones that were made in this style. They probably made about 150 would be my guess, an educated guess you might say. But of those that were made, only 7 were known to have survived, or at least are recorded now by the Packard Club roster, which keeps the numbers of cars that are out there right now. I contacted them when this car came to light and told them, here's number 8. And likely this is the only original unrestored one left. I would probably hazard a guess, and I think that's probably pretty accurate. The backstory on this car is really interesting. It was, again, sold in Los Angeles, 1932, by Earl Anthony. I don't know who the original owner was, but by 1949, this car was in Oregon. And it was purchased by a young man, a 22-year-old young man named David Welp, who lived in a little town called Toledo, Oregon, which is out near the Oregon coast. He bought this car, and keep in mind, in 1949, this was a 17-year-old used car, which today you could equate it to being 2025 right now. This would be like buying a 2008 used car. So I don't know what he paid for it, but I'm sure it wasn't a lot, simply because, again, it was a used car at that point. However, David never married. He took care of his parents until they died, and this was really his pride and joy, was this car. and he drove it regularly, didn't drive it excessively. When he got it, I'm told it had about 62,000 miles on it. By the time he passed away in 2010, it had 69,000 miles on it. But he was a good steward. He took care of it. And again, it was never restored. This car has never been restored. It has never been really completely apart from anything I can tell. He kept it, I say, as needed. He brush painted the hood at some point, or it was done before he got it. And it really wears all of its history very well on this car. The nice thing about it is really solid, and it's remarkable. When David died again in 2010, after that, in 2012, it was acquired by a good friend of mine, George, here in Oregon. And George was a great Packard aficionado, and he had lots of Packards over the years. He wanted this one, I think, simply because it was so original. As the old saying goes, they're only original once. This car, George, when he got it, it was not running, so he went through the engine. He did all the things you would normally do and a few more. I know that he replaced the distributor, rebuilt it, he rebuilt the fuel pump, the carburetor, all the necessary things you would do. There was an electric fuel pump added for ease of starting after the car has sat for a while. He also went through the radiator, had it rotted out, cleaned out, and repainted and put back in the car. So he did a lot of work on the car. Also, a full exhaust system was put on the car, too, as well. So it's really an amazingly preserved car. And it's just striking to see it in pretty much shape that was, again, kept but not restored. And it's hard to find these cars, something like this, particularly a Packard. You might see some other cars that have been just kept and not restored, but rarely a Packard. Most all of them really have been found and they were restored either by the 1970s usually. But again, David Welp kept this car and just loved it. He just really loved it. I believe the top was replaced. This is not an original top, in my opinion, but it's probably 75 years old at this point. So it wears well with the rest of the car. The interior is original, with the exception of, I believe, the lower seat cushions were likely recovered, but the rest of the interior and the rumble seat appears to be original. The nice thing is the gauges do work, the important ones at least. Oil pressure gauge, temperature gauge, amp meter, those work. The speedometer does not work at this point, nor does the clock or the fuel gauge. And again, the fuel gauge is pretty standard on these cars that they don't work at this age. But it really runs nicely, and it's just really a solid, nice car. George also replaced the tires, by the way. These were done in 2012. I would guess the car has maybe 100 miles or less, really, since it was restored, or, well, not restored, but when it was refreshed, we might say, is probably the better word for this car. The chrome is really good, surprisingly. The headlights, everything. Of course, the bumpers were repainted. I have pictures of this car when David Welp had it, and you'll see that the bumpers were painted even then. The thermostatic shutters do work, and they work well. The headlights work. The tail lights work. It's just really all together. It just is really a good car. And I will hazard to say, you're never going to find another one like it. I have not seen one, and I've handled hundreds and hundreds of cars and dozens of Packards over the year, and I've never seen a Packard like this. So it really is, to use a word that you usually don't want to use, but I think this is unique. There is no other one like it, that's for sure. Surprising thing was, after George had this car and got it running and performing well, he took it to the 2012 Forest Grove Concours d'Elegance, which is one of the largest shows here in the Northwest, and it's one of the oldest concours on the West Coast. It's been going on now for over 50 years. The interesting thing was, when he showed this car as a preservation car, it was placed next to a fully restored one of these, which was owned by another friend of mine. So surprisingly, 2 of the 8 that are known lived here in Oregon. I surprisingly also was involved in selling the other one, the fully restored one, which I sold last year in 2024, and it went for close to $200,000. So they are an unusual car. They're not common. They are really nice to drive, though. This car really does run well. Again, considering you have 93 years of history under its tires. So there is no rust in this car to speak of. I mean, there's no rot. It's very solid. The doors hang really well. The wood is great in this car, and if you open the door, you don't have to slam it. It doesn't sag. I can push down on this door. It doesn't move. The wood is really great, and it closes exceptionally well. So all of the fit of this car is really good. The other thing, I went around this car looking for things that might be missing. And you would think after this many years, there's got to be a lot of pieces missing on this car. No, the only things that I found that were missing on this car are the two little round locks that lock the side mounts on the car. And they're bolted on already, but they added a lock in case someone wanted to steal a tire or tried to steal a tire. Those two little locks are missing, and the passenger side windshield wiper arm and blade. That's it. That's all I can find that's missing on this car. And certainly, those are easy to replace. I guess the question would be, what would you do with this car at this point? You certainly could restore it fully if you wanted to. You could drive it just like this too. And again, you're going to be the only one in town or the only one around that would have one that is like this. It is presentable. Yes, there are chips. Yes, there are dings. There are some small little things on this car, but it's all part of the history. It's all part of the character. Overall, the body is straight. The panels are nice. It's had, obviously, just use over the years, just use and care. So, once again, I would say this is really unusual. It is an exceptional find, and I don't think you could duplicate it again. Certainly, I don't think there's another one like it out there. But now, let's go take it for a drive. All right, let's go for a ride. It's a beautiful day. The car shifts well, the brakes are great, it's really surprisingly nice. Has good power, and it's really a pleasure to drive. So if you have any questions about this Packard or any of the other cars we represent, feel free to give me a call at 503-309-7729 or find us online at charvetclassiccars.com. I'm David Charvet. Thanks for watching.